Hello, everyone. My name is Byron King, and I am a geologist and a newsletter writer. I work with a group called Agora Financial in Baltimore, Maryland, USA. I particularly work with a group called St. Paul Research. I write a newsletter at this point called Whiskey and Gunpowder. I have been covering geology plays, energy and mining for many, many years. I go places and do things. I take my geological hammer and I take my Brunton compass with me, and we go out in the field and look at wonderful prospects, and I meet superb people who know what they're doing in terms of finding and developing and building energy and mining projects. I have had the great pleasure of many visits to the Yukon in Northwest Canada, and it is a spectacular region, both in terms of beauty and the social and cultural beauty of the land, in terms of the natural beauty and the human beauty of it all. And it is a geologically beautiful plot as well. For those of you who are geographically challenged, the Yukon is right next to this place called Alaska. And so if there is this massive area across Alaska and into Yukon called the Tintina Gold Belt, it extends from the Bering Sea over in Nome, it's full of Russian submarines, all the way back across Alaska through the storied, Yukon and all that, up the river and into the Yukon Territory, home of Robert Service, the great Canadian poet who wrote so many wonderful things about mining up there. And today it is my pleasure to present three superb companies from the Yukon who really represent a lot of both the human and the geological beauty of this area. In terms of really big developments, we've got Western Copper and Gold and Paul West Cells, which is a massive porphyry type of deposit. It involves just tens and hundreds of millions of tons of ore grade material, a lot of energy, a lot of earth movement to develop it, but a fascinating piece of geology. We got Greg Johnson with a company called Metallic Minerals, and that is in the storied Keno Hill district of the Yukon, a silver district like no other. It's easily among the 2 or 3 best silver districts in North America, which is a very big place if you think about it. It's fabulous geology, and it is a very much a high grade type of area, not this sort of lower grade disseminated, but really high grade things. And then our third Pre-PDAC from a company called Flow Metals, which works in the Yukon in an area that's traditionally considered a placer mining district, where they mine the gravel out of the river and they filter it and they sift the gold out of it. But that there's both the gold in the river, but then what's the source of the gold? You've got these hills and such, and he's going to tell us what they're doing there. So today for our presentation, we have three great companies that represent a very solid area of the Yukon and really get you into that Tintina Gold Belt, that Tintina mineralization belt. It's gold, silver, copper. There are many other metals there as well, but these gentlemen are going to tell you all about what they're doing. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand the floor over in terms of what I mentioned earlier. I'm going to start with Paul West Cells from Western Copper and Gold. And Paul, give us the 3-minute or 4-minute quick presentation of what your company is and what you've been doing to build this company up there.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for the introduction, Byron. You've already done a pretty good job of capturing it in that little 30-second clip. But yeah, Western Copper and Gold has one asset, which is the Casino Copper Gold project located up in the Yukon. We've been developing this project for about 14 years now. And as you pointed out, this is a large, very large copper gold porphyry. We're looking at about 3.5 billion tons of total ore, and that's from a resource that we just updated last summer. That contains 21 million ounces of gold and 11 billion pounds of copper. So, this is a significant copper gold project, certainly for the Yukon, certainly for Canada, and even globally, it stacks up pretty nicely. As I said, we've been developing it for about 14 years. We issued a feasibility study in 2013. that feasibility study showed it had very, very good economics at 2013 metal prices. Right now, we're in the midst of updating that with the goal to have a PEA level study out in Q2 of this year, and then a full feasibility study out by the end of the year. In addition to that, last year we acquired this land package to the west of us called Canadian Creek. We did actually, certainly not last year. I forget about this being January 2019. We acquired the Canadian Creek property. Last year, we drilled a little bit of that, a little bit of our project as well. Hit some really nice. We were sort of trying to track down some of the heap leachable gold, because our project, big copper porphyry, it's got a cap that we leach first, and then the main supergene and hypogene is processed through a mill. We just released some drill results this morning. 175 meters of 0.76 gram per ton gold through the cap. Great grades there, should work to upgrade the overall grades in the overall deposit. But, when we look in terms of moving forward, right now we're moving forward on three fronts. One is that updated PEA and moving into a feasibility study. Two is, continue a bit of exploration on this new package and some of the other targets that we have on our property. And then the third thing, this is a big project. This is a globally important project. So really look at bringing in a partner, looking at M&A activities. We've got a bit of a new board that's really wants to move things aggressively. So it's an exciting time to be in the company and running it, and it's an exciting time to be a shareholder.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Let's move on to Metallic and Greg. Greg, I introduced you second. I gave a little bit of an intro to what you do and everything else. You and I go back a while, 10 or 12 years. I met you, up in the Yukon there. Tell us what you're doing. It's a terrific story. Everybody pay attention.
Well, thanks for the intro there, Byron. So we're just to the north of where Paul is with Western Copper in the Keno Hill Silver District. So Metallic Minerals is a silver-focused exploration development company. We started in 2016, basically consolidating the district around our neighbor Alexco, who's just recently gone back into production. The Keno Hill District is one of the world's highest grade silver districts, with historic grades well over 1,000 grams per ton silver, and over 300 million ounces of past production plus current M&I resources, with about 100 million ounces in new resource ounces just in the last half a dozen years, including a couple of major discoveries, the Birmingham in particular, that's really put the Keno district back on the map as a place that's not just a historic district, but a place that new world-class discoveries in silver are being made. Keno Hill is arguably, with the Birmingham discovery, the Birmingham is probably one of the best undeveloped silver mines in the world, over 1,200 grams per ton silver grade right near surface. So we're exploring in the lesser explored parts of the district off to the east, as well as we have 6 advanced stage targets that are right on the known trends, kind of head frame exploration that we're advancing towards initial resource stage. And one of the things that was particularly exciting for us in 2020 was testing for the very first time some of these large, newly defined targets out on the eastern part of the district. Up until 2020, there'd never been any drilling in that area. We got the first drill holes into these, multi-kilometer scale targets, and we successfully intercepted sulfides and structures. Assays are pending on that, any kind of week now, and it's an exciting development because it effectively stretches the Keno Hill district by at least 10, maybe even 15 kilometers to the east, and makes that entire eastern half of the belt, highly prospective. The model that we're starting to apply in the eastern part of the district is that we might be seeing a deeper erosional level, and perhaps we're getting closer to the source intrusions that drove the entire district. So not only are we seeing classic high-grade Keno style structures that can run 500 grams to 1,000 gram type silver grades, but we're seeing the potential for bulk tonnages. And this hasn't been something that's really been seen in much detail in the Keno district before. But the initial drilling we're seeing is suggesting that we're either seeing stacked vein structures, or potentially we're starting to see porphyry dikes, and we're starting to see breccia zones that could suggest we're closer to a source intrusion. In the silver world, when we start to think about large silver deposits that are associated with intrusions, you start to think about things like Newmont's massive Cripple Creek and Penasquito deposits. And so the idea that we might have a similar setting to that in Yukon is quite an exciting development for the company. We were very successful in raising funding in 2020. We've got about $8 million in the treasury. We've got about $12 million in the money warrants. Eric Sprott's our largest individual investor, and topped up during the Canaccord-led financing last fall. So, basically, after management, he's the largest investor and is very bullish on what the activities we're seeing in the Keno Hill district.
Very good. Thank you so much. And third, and certainly not least, Jaap, why don't you tell us about Flow? You are in it as well, a historical mining district. Tell us about what your company is doing, where it is, and we'll get into more detail later. But give us a quick rundown on your company there.
Sure. Yeah. So Flow Metals has been around for 2 years. Most of the time was private, and we only listed on the CSE in June of 2020. We have 3 projects, and the Yukon Project in the 60-mile region is our flagship. It's located on 3 placer creeks, which are three creeks that have been mined for placer gold. And Miller Creek, the center creek on that property, at one time was the busiest creek in the Yukon, with several hundred miners on it around the turn of the century. We did an initial raise and did our inaugural drilling on the 60-mile, and the thing we're chasing at the 60-mile project is essentially the source of the placer gold. And so we've worked very closely with the placer miners to see what that gold essentially looks like. What are they mining? Are there still chips of rock attached to it? Is the gold dendritic or is it flattened, etc.? And we ended up with reinterpreting the structural geology. We've come up with a structural geological model that we tested during our drilling campaign. And if that model is correct, we're sitting on about 17 or more strike length of mineralized faults on our entire project. We drilled in Glacier Creek, fairly far upstream, and the reason for that is this is a place where we can actually combine the structural geology with the placer gold in a way that we know there's not a lot coming from upstream. And so we can really see the relation of that, where do we find the placer gold, where is that sedimentologically controlled versus where is it geologically controlled? And of course, that's what we want to drill. Our drill results are just starting to trickle in from the lab. It's been a slow process, as most people know, for the entire industry. What our preliminary data indicates, so I can't speak to any results from the lab yet, but preliminary data includes data from handheld XRF machines, etc. And it shows that 13 of our 15 holes, we drilled about 850 meters in total. 13 of those holes contained fairly substantial arsenic anomalies, which tends to be correlated to the gold. And in 4 out of the 15 holes, the XRF also picked up gold, which is a little less reliable than arsenic, but there should be about a 5 ppm, 5 gram a ton detection limit on fine grain material for XRF guns. So we do think that there might be something coming from the lab, which will be interesting at the very least. We've also just found a new zone in historic core that is about 13 grams a ton over 2 meters, which was not picked up by historical operators because of a combination of the geology, the type of intersect, and the type of analysis they were using. So that's another bonus, essentially. yeah, that's where we're at now. So we're looking forward to getting our lab results and doing a more substantial drilling program next year. We have a lot of targets, and it looks like we might have some targets to follow up on. And this is all road accessible. It's a very easy claim to work. There are placer camps on site. There's heavy machinery on site. So it's a great claim to work with easy logistics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that's great. So we have three great overviews here of different styles. We've got the massive Western copper and gold, porphyry. We've got the more vein-oriented metallic, and then we've got a classical placer and chasing the source kind of thing going on here. For now that we have listeners and viewers to this, this program, some of them are probably real pros, have been there, know everything about it. Others may not be as familiar with the Yukon or working up there. One of the questions I want to ask all three of you, just one of the things I'm always interested in right off the bat, is that we're in the Yukon, we're in Canada, so obviously we have a good legal jurisdiction to deal with. But one of the things that Canadian, one of the issues with Canadian mining is always relations with the First Nation people up there. I mean, in my experience, we've seen a lot of good relations, but I'd like each of you to just go through and give a quick overview of how have you resolved it, and to ensure the title to your claims and the developability of what you're doing. Paul, why don't you tell us what you've been doing at the casino project to make sure that everything's squared away?
Yeah, sure. I guess maybe I'll take a step back and just talk in general about the Yukon, because there's some interesting facts about the Yukon and the First Nations. Most of the First Nations in the Yukon are settled, and so there was 11 First Nation, 11. I think it was 11 of the 13. Does that sound right, Greg? Sounds right. Of the First Nations signed a modern treaty, came up with something called an umbrella final agreement. Out of that umbrella final agreement came actually the regulatory process. So the permitting process in the Yukon is called YESA. And that comes out of this agreement with the First Nation. And so it's one of the only jurisdictions in Canada that actually has modern treaties with First Nations. They're fairly recent. This is sort of, YESA rolled out in the early 2000s, so it's sort of a new process. And so there is a little bit of people learning how to make it all work out. Specifically for us at Western Copper and Gold in our casino project, the project itself is on the Selkirk First Nation traditional territory. So this is the same First Nation that has the Minto mine. So they understand mining. They've been very good to work with. We've been up there for 14 years. My joke is I think I'm on my fourth chief now. So but they're sophisticated. To say that they're pro mining is probably too simplistic. They're pro mining. They're very pro environment. They're very pro, making sure that that their land, their traditional territory isn't, forever sort of scarred by poor mining practices. So there's a big dialogue back and forth on that. It's important to get out early and have that dialogue and to continually have that dialogue. And that's what we've done. And so that's one of the First Nations. And we have, we've had in the past with them and a couple of the other First Nations, what we call cooperation agreements. So these are first stage agreements where you sort of talk about how you're going to work together. And that's usually what you have at your first step as you're entering permitting. And then usually at some point through that permitting process, you get into an impact benefit agreement or something like that. So that as we got farther down the road, that's likely where we would where we'll end up with those First Nations. But yeah, no, it takes time, and I think that's the one thing that's frustrating, particularly for shareholders and sometimes boards that want to see projects move at light speed. But if you put in the time and effort, I think most of the First Nations in the Yukon are pretty good to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. That was very thorough. Greg, you're in the Keno Hill area, which has been mined for over 100 years or so.
Yeah.
You had to put together a lot of claims to really put your land package together. And Keno Hill itself is a former, I'll use a U.S. term, like a Superfund site from historical mining. But I mean, how is your situation with claims, legal title, and First Nation relations in the area where you're working?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, there's a long history of mining in this region that stretches all the way back to early 1900s. We are in the traditional territory of the Nacho Nyack Dung, and they have impact benefit agreements, as Paul mentioned, as advanced projects that are mines now with both Alexco and Victoria Gold, who's across the valley. So both a big gold project and the high grade Keno Hill silver mines. So at earlier stages like ourselves, we're still developing resources. It's often engagement by keeping them informed, providing meetings. We try to involve local businesses from the First Nation communities in the project, and these guys, have businesses that are associated with fuel delivery and transport and logistics, and oftentimes we can engage them in terms of our technical teams, some of the technicians. So it's a collaboration. As Paul said, it takes time, but it's an important element. And I think companies in the Yukon tend to have good relationships with the First Nations. The First Nations are active in terms of that engagement. And I think the government is there as a partner in that whole process as well. And I think when you look at the permitting process in Yukon, as Paul said, it's a relatively new process since the early 2000s, but, to any place where you can go from feasibility to permits in a year and a half, 2 years, is by global standards, a very timely process. And so I think the Yukon does stand out in terms of a place that mining, especially environmentally responsible approach to mining, is welcome, and that there's a very well-defined process to take a project from early stage permitting, which is the process that we're at as an exploration company, on through mine development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we see in companies like you mentioned, Alexco, which is your neighbor. I mean, they're a working project at this point, mining project, and they hire a lot of First Nation people. Not too far from where you are is the Victoria Gold construction mine.
That's right.
Mine, year and a half old, and again, many First Nation employees there. So that's a lot of paychecks, a lot of payroll up there.
Yes.
Essentially, the same questions to you. Tell us about the area where you're working at the 60-mile area, and who owns it, who runs it, what are your relations with your neighbors?
Yeah, so we are in the traditional territory of the Tronda-Quechin First Nation, and we actually run another company called Go Metals that's been in the Yukon for a little longer, also with a flagship in the Tronda-Quechin. So we were in touch with them before, working on Flow Metal's 60-mile project. I think the main thing for us, of course, we're junior exploration, so our permitting, the permitting for our work is a lot simpler, I guess, than for companies that are dealing with feasibility studies, et cetera. But what I can say is that the process in Yukon is incredibly transparent for everyone, and I think it's more transparent than in other provinces, which really benefits the junior exploration companies as well as the First Nations, of course. So they're clear, and the ways to engage are clear. And at the same time, of course, when we try to take a similar approach to Greg, in that we always try to bring business to First Nations-run companies. There are many of those in Dawson City, which is the base where we work out of, and that's always helpful, of course, and that cultivates the connections that we have there. So Yeah, I think Yukon is a great province to work in for that transparency.
Very good. Okay, now I'm gonna ask Jaap another question, and then I'll sort of work my way backwards so that I don't just keep going around and around. Jaap, you mentioned in your introduction that you're in an area that's been placer mined for quite a time, and there's roads and such there. But I'd like you to just take another minute and give us a little more of the rundown on your logistics, because obviously, if you know anything about the map of the Yukon, it's a very big place. Takes a lot of time to get everywhere. If you don't have a road, or if you can't, haul it in or out on a helicopter or an airplane, you're stuck. So tell us about working where you are in terms of the logistics, and that, roads, power, access to diesel fuel and supplies, and, food and such you need to run an operation.
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky in at the 60-mile project that we're very close to the top of the World Highway, which we're about 80 kilometers west of Dawson City. Dawson City, you can of course go by a paved highway, and then the top of the World Highway is it's an unpaved highway, which is maintained by the government of Yukon from the time that the river ice breaks up until the time that it freezes over again. And from the top of the World Highway, it's a few kilometers down a road maintained by placer miners to our claims, and that road can be driven by semi-trucks. As far as fuel goes, etc., on our claims, there are two larger placer camps on the claim, which of course have all the equipment they need, hose and graders, etc. They have diesel tanks and those kind of things. So we're very lucky that as a junior exploration company, we can piggyback off of our placer operators' infrastructure in place, essentially. And it really it just makes it so easy to work because in other projects, we've run helicopter accessible projects as well, and if a driller forgets something or there's a part that needs to be flown in for a driller that costs several thousands of dollars, and whereas on a road accessible project, of course, you can just drive that part in, and it takes 2 hours to get it from Dawson City. So it makes things incredibly cost effective. Yeah, and that from the placer camps also, there are roads that sort of crisscross the property and certainly crisscross our main exploration targets as well. So we're in a good place to do very cost-effective exploration for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Greg. You're in that Keno Hill area. Again, it's been mined for 100 years, but so you have roads and power. But is there anything you want to supplement in the sense that we can do that logistics thing, and get it done, or anything else?
Yeah, so we're at the end of the Silver Trail Highway, which comes right in past the town of Mayo, where there's a hydro facility that provides power both to the mill at Keno Hill as well as to Victoria Gold. Mm-hmm. And then that highway connects to the main Yukon Highway that goes down to the year-round deep sea port at Skagway, where there is already a concentrate shipping facility that's been used historically and currently by Alexco, by the Minto mine, and I would guess probably by Western Copper when they eventually get into production. So the point that we make with our project, and I think it applies to all three, it sounds like, is there are very remote parts of the Yukon that don't have road access, and that can be a challenge that you address it with helicopters and other things, but in terms of the district that we're working in, it's pretty much all road accessible, and everything is within trucking distance to that centralized infrastructure. So, that's going to reduce your cost to build these projects. It's going to reduce your cost to operate them, and it's going to shorten your timeline to bring new deposits into production.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Paul. Paul, do you want to add a few words on the logistics of your casino project?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the perspectives I can bring is with casino. I mean, this is a large concentrator that needs to have 24/7, 365 access. And, we have the benefit of actually having brought the project all the way to a feasibility study level. So, it was interesting when we looked at and I'll sort of maybe walk through a couple of different parts, but, first of all, starting with roads. I mean, it's easy to say, well, you've got paved highways, but people think of the Yukon, it's cold, and they think cold, they think snow, even though there's not that much snow up in the Yukon. And so when we were doing the feasibility study, we went to the government and said, well, how often, how many days per year are the roads not accessible? And they sort of paused and they said, well, what do you mean? Like, it's not days, it's maybe an hour here, an hour there. Like, I mean, we're talking, highways here that are, wide open year round in terms of accessibility. And, as Greg talked about, I mean, you have a port at Skagway, which, here's Casino, this large, multi-billion-dollar project, we're looking to ship our concentrate through Skagway. Well, it's the port of Skagway and the ore loading facility in Skagway, in its heyday when the Faro mine was operating, actually loaded more concentrate per month than what we're contemplating with Casino. So it's actually sort of a little bit of a hidden, aspect of the Yukon. I mean, it's not right on the west coast of the north, but it's pretty darn close. Our Casino project is 560 kilometers from the port of Skagway. Just because of the weather up there, it certainly gets cold, but again, not that much snow, not that much other sort of challenges. So it's fairly accessible from that point of view. So, I mean, I think that's something that certainly people fail to recognize. And then, power, there's a grid system. We're not looking to use that at Casino, but, it's a pretty sort of sophisticated grid for most of the other mining projects that are moving forward as well.
Good, thank you. Paul, since we were talking about, concentrates and shipping it out, what is the plan, or what do you envision as the material that you would generate on site out of after you process all this rock and ore? What are you going to generate? What are you going to put in a truck, and what are you going to send down to that Skagway shipping port?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, our Casino project actually has three products that sort of, contain value that leave site. So, first of all, from the heap leach, of course, you've got gold doré. That typically is helicoptered out or armored car out or something like that. And then there's the concentrate. And so our concentrate, we produce two concentrates at site. One is a copper gold concentrate, with the gold being arguably probably half the value in the concentrate. I mean, it's Casino is a true copper gold project, and then a molybdenum concentrate as well. And so the copper concentrate goes the same way that they ship it out of Minto. So they've got these sort of 40-ton trucks, and they side dump, and they just fill them up and drive them down to Skagway and tip them over and load them onto a ship. It's pretty simple. And then the molybdenum will come out in bags. And yeah, it's sort of interesting. And Greg was talking about the Alexco's Belkino project. They actually have these they call them the muffin trucks up in the Yukon. They're sort of very specialized containers because a very high grade, high metal content material that they ship around. But that's what they look to do there. But yeah, I mean, it's, I tell people, not only is there great transportation possibilities there, they're being used. They're being used by Minto. They're being used by Alexco. They're being used by Victoria Gold.
Very good. So, Greg, I'll bring it over to you. Paul stole a little bit of your thunder, but tell us a little bit more about the concentrates that you would expect to generate, from your various claims, and how would it relate to what Alexco is doing, in terms of the end product that comes out?
Yeah, sure. These are primary silver mines, which means that more than half the value, in fact, 75% of the value is silver. But when you look at these in terms of the ore, the silver is hosted in a variety of minerals, including native silver, but it comes along with the lead in a mineral called galena. And then the second economic mineral is sphalerite, so zinc. So basically the material is crushed very finely into a powder. That powder is separated from the rock through a process called flotation, and it creates two concentrates: a very high grade silver lead concentrate, and then a second separate zinc concentrate. Very well understood metallurgy. It's pretty consistent all the way across the district. Doesn't change much either vertically or laterally. And so we would anticipate the same kinds of characteristics as what Alexco is doing. And that concentrate is probably one of the best and highest grade concentrates in the world in terms of that silver lead concentrate. Especially with the big project down in Guatemala, shut down a few years ago for Tahoe. It's probably the top, kind of value concentrate for silver in the world, which is going to make it very sellable. And because it's very high grades, you're not needing to ship a whole lot of material. So it's not, a massive amount of trucking that needs to be done to get it down to the port facility.
I'll get to Yap in just a moment, but what I'm hearing from Paul and Greg, we're looking at two deposits that are very focused on something that's big in the news, battery metals. We're looking at copper. If you're going to do, if you're going to build out windmills, whatever, you're going to need zinc for the steel. Lead is still a battery metal. Last time I looked, the world's most prolific metal in terms of doing batteries. And silver. Holy smokes! Look at what's going on in silver. Recently, just the last few days from when we're recording this. But Greg, you had an interesting chart on your presentation that the world supply of silver is going down and the world demand is going up, and a big part of that wedge of going up is called solar panels, which seems to be in the news lately since there's a new occupant in the White House. So, Yap, I'm going to give the floor to you. What do you envision as the product of what you're doing? Is it all gold, or is there something else in there that can juice up what your output, or what?
It's pretty much all gold. I think the placer miners tend to find roughly 85 to 94% gold, and the rest is silver. So pretty much all the value for us will be in gold, and we see gold as both coarse grain free gold, as well as we expect there to be some gold that is hosted in and around arsenopyrite grains and those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to have to leave some time at the end for other things, Q&A and such from the viewing audience out there. But I'm going to give all three of you now a moment to just sort of wrap it up and give the viewers or the listeners out there, give them the 2-minute reason why they should very quickly just run to their stockbroker and buy the shares of stock in your company if they and just buy with both hands. Paul, tell us why the investors should lay their money down and buy some shares of Western Copper and Gold.
I like that. Well, first of all, let's start off. You talked about Greg's graph about silver supply and demand. You got the same one for copper, and it's being talked about a lot. There's a lot of compelling reasons to buy Western Copper and Gold. First of all, these large copper gold porphyries, they're few and far between. There's not a lot of them, point one. There's not a lot of them that add up economically, point two. And there's not a lot of them that are in good jurisdictions like Canada. So just those three aspects, and the fact that copper, we've seen a great run here. It's going to continue to run. We need more copper for all the reasons that you've mentioned. And just, owning a share of Western Copper and Gold means owning a share of our great asset up at Casino. The other thing is, and I forgot to mention in my preamble, we just financed, we've got $30 million in the bank. So we're well financed here for the next 2-3 years plus in terms of, aggressively moving the project forward. Lastly, if you look at what we have laid out here for the next 12 months, it's an exciting time. We have an updated PEA here coming Q2, updated feasibility study by the end of the year, back into permitting. We might do some exploration as well. And, I can't emphasize it enough. With our new board, looking at M&A activities, really growing a company with some as a business, and not just by growing the asset, is it going to be another key component as well. So all those things together, as I said when I started off, it's exciting to be in the company now, and it's exciting to be a shareholder.
Very much so. Thank you, Greg. Same question. Tell us why everybody should go out and buy some shares of Metallic.
Yeah, I think I would second a lot of the comments made by Paul. I think one thing in the gold and silver space, we've been going through a consolidation for the last 6 months. So, many of these companies have consolidated or corrected, 50, 60% from the highs back in August. We believe that we're in the early days of a multi-year commodity bull market, maybe similar to 1999 to 2011. And so very early innings. So this is both nearer term an opportunity pricing wise to get these things at lower values than they were just a few months ago. And longer term, we think it's very, very early days. Specifically for metallic minerals, as I mentioned, we're just coming off of the biggest drill campaign in the company's history. We had 2 drills turning through late last year, a core drill and a reverse circulation drill, testing some of these new discoveries on the east, as well as advancing the advanced stage targets towards initial resources. We're anticipated with the financing that we completed with Canaccord Genuity to have a much expanded program in 2021. We're in the planning stages now, but anticipating a 3 or perhaps even a 4 drill campaign this year, starting earlier than last year as well. So I think it's going to be an exciting year. I'm very bullish on the silver metals in particular in terms of their fundamentals. Silver has lagged gold, and oftentimes in the kind of second half or so of a bull market cycle, silver tends to outperform gold. So I think it's an excellent time for investors to be looking at quality names. And to emphasize Paul's point, these are great assets in a fantastic geologic jurisdiction where mining is the most important economic driver in the Yukon. And there's a real scarcity of those kind of quality assets in low-risk jurisdictions. And I think metallic minerals, Western copper, and flow all fit that kind of characteristic.
Absolutely. I'm going to go to Yop in a minute. I just want to make a quick point on the most important industry in the Yukon comment. I mean, as you get further away from the Yukon, people do other things with their life, and mining and minerals just isn't a big thing. A lot of people who are not part of the industry really don't get it and don't understand it. But people who say, oh, the Yukon can get by on tourism, all I have to say is 2020, where the number of tourism was about 0. Okay? Right. And it was the mines and minerals that kept the lights on up there, literally, for pretty much the whole last year. Yop, I'm gonna give you the last comment. Obviously you're in the gold business. Everybody loves gold. We all love gold. But tell us why an investor should take a hard look at buying some shares of Flow.
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, we're a young company. We've only just listed on the CSE in the summer of 2020. We're here for a discovery. We want to discover something, and of course, the discovery is incredibly exciting for an exploration company because it essentially shows that management of a company can turn rocks that were thought barren into something valuable, and with that tends to come a nice appreciation. We are listed on the CSE under the ticker FWM, and we trade at between 6 to 8 cents at a market cap of about $2 to $2.5 million. So we think we are quite undervalued relative to our peers. Of course, everybody thinks that, but we think we have good reason to. Our lab results are just coming in, so we think we're going to have news flow over the next couple months, Again, I think our 60-mile project is going to be set for a good news coming with both what we have drilled last fall and what we want to be drilling next. If we can prove our theory, we'll have a large strike length of mineralized faults on the claim.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're describing a situation where you have a company that's one drill hole or one lab report, away from a from a 10x explosion in the share price and then moving from there. I think we've used up, most of the time we're supposed to do in terms of this round robin. I'll finish to the readers or the viewers and the listeners out there by saying, if you've never been to the Yukon, when this whole pandemic, begins to break and lift, it's definitely worth your time to go there. Bring a rock hammer if you have one. Bring a Brunton compass if you have one. There's so much geology to do up there. It's a beautiful, spectacularly beautiful area of the world. Fabulous geology. The people are wonderful. It is an absolutely mystifying place. And with that, we'll close this portion of our discussion, and we'll move on to entertain questions from other people, which is what I understand happens next. Okay, thank you so much. You were a great panel, and I truly enjoyed hearing you discuss your fabulous projects up there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Byron.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're back. Hello, everyone, again. We took a little bumper there. And a couple of, we've had questions coming in over the last 45 minutes. We have about 14 or 15 minutes left to take questions. We actually have more questions than we have minutes, which is always a good thing. So without further ado, I'm going to go through a couple of things. I'll start with Greg. We've had a number of questions about metallic. The people are awaiting your drilling results, and I'm going to combine a couple of questions. They're awaiting your drilling results. You might know things, but maybe you can say things, maybe you can't. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that'll get us all in trouble. But can you give a little forecast of what's going on? And I'll combine that with another question: is that it's surprising in a geologic and exploration sense that that Alexco's Birmingham deposit went undiscovered for so many years. But it came in, and it's massive. It's gigantic. So the question is, can you talk a little bit about what we should expect to see from your drilling program, and are there any perhaps surprises that you would anticipate based on geophysics, based on structure, based on whatever in your part of the world up there in the Keno Hill area?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll take the second part of the comment first, which is Birmingham. I totally agree that Birmingham has been really underappreciated as a discovery. Over 50 million ounces of resources and growing with their recent holes. I think Birmingham is probably one of the best undeveloped silver mines in the world now going into development. How was it discovered? I mean, this is one of those classic historic producing districts that you come in and understand the geology, and you start to build on what was known in the past and recognize the opportunities to make new discoveries. And the Alexco team did a great job in, basically making the discovery of Birmingham that was right on one of the major known trends. And I think it speaks to the potential of the Keno district to have additional new discoveries that are relevant to some of the largest, producers in silver. Specifically for metallic minerals, yeah, we're excited about the pending results. I mean, the labs with COVID, with the logistical things, it's been challenging. The labs are catching up. We're asking our investors to be patient, and that we're going to have first results very, very soon. But what I can say is geologically, one of the big exciting things we've been working on, we have these advanced stage projects that are on the main known historic trends, much like Birmingham, but we've gone out into the eastern part of the Keno district, and we've brought a new perspective. This is a part of the district that was not previously explored very intensively, a bit of work by Alexco's predecessor back in the 1960s, but otherwise we're the first to kind of come in, take a complete top to bottom approach of acquiring, the new information, the soils, the mapping, the geophysics. And out of that work came these huge multi-kilometer scale soil anomalies. And, that was pretty exciting. And so in late 2020, we basically got a reverse circulation drill out on those big targets. Couldn't drill them all, but we drilled a handful of those. And much to our pleasant surprise, we had sulfides and structure in those early holes. And so results on that are pending, but effectively this is a new discovery. It's extended the Keno district by at least 10 kilometers east of the Keno Hill mine. It opens up this huge patch of ground. And a big part of the excitement here, Byron, is that we're getting not only classic high-grade Keno style mineralization like Birmingham, but we're seeing the potential for bulk tonnage. And that's the thing that we haven't seen in the district before. And that's the thing that is starting to open some eyes is, if we can start to have things that are not only a few meters of thousands of grams silver, but, tens or even hundreds of meters of width of stuff that could be looked at open pit, that's a game changer for the district. So it's a pretty exciting development. And I would say, be patient. There's numbers coming soon, and we're all excited to get those out.
Great is king and bulk is wonderful. So you're using those words that we like to hear,
Yeah.
Now let's quickly go to another question. This is for Paul, and it's from a mutual friend of all of ours, Rick Van Neuenhuis, who is just an icon of exploration in the north and the things he's done in Alaska and what he did with Trilogy Metals, which is beautiful project over in Ambler, just on the south side of the Brooks Range. A little plug for Rick there. But Rick is a scholar of Alaska, among many other things. He wants to know if what have you been doing in terms of talking with Alaskan officials about moving product, down to Skagway? Are there any issues there? He mentions the railway that a lot of people who go on a cruise ship Alaska, they pull into Skagway and they take that little railroad up to the top of the mountains and come back down. But is that railroad a possibility of a working rail for moving concentrate, or we're just going to stick to trucks?
Yeah, no. So to answer the first part, yes, we have. I mean, we actually have a draft memorandum of understanding with AIDA, which is the Alaska Import Development or Industrial Development Association or something like that, in terms of using the port. So we sort of have some draft terms. We got that to that stage. We're very, very active with the Port of Skagway. There's, as you can imagine, lots of politics going on down there. But as you said earlier, the idea of not just relying on tourism, I think, was a pretty important point for 2020 for the Port of Skagway. The railway is a really interesting thing to talk about because when Faro operated, and Faro operated during a couple of different periods, but during one of the periods, that's exactly what they did. They trucked their concentrate as far as Carcross, which is sort of still within the Yukon and at the top of things, and then took it on the train down. We looked at that and it didn't really add up for us. But the other thing that's quite interesting is that there's this initiative called the A2A project, which is actually, it's called Alberta to Alaska. And it's a rail transport really to move oil from Alaska all the way through the Yukon from Alberta all the way through the Yukon up to Alaska, going right past Casino, because we'd be a key stop on it. So, I mean, that's early stage stuff, but interesting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. We could talk about this all day, but let's move on because our moments are precious here. Yap, we had a question from a viewer out there about your recent drilling results and what have you released some results recently, and you've got a few other things in the pipeline. Can you tell us where things stand right now in terms of your exploration program there?
Sure. We, as Greg already mentioned, of course, everything is a little later than we want this year, but that's just the reality. We drilled 835 meters and we resampled, I believe, about 100 meters of historical core or so. And we know that the gold on the 60-mile project is heterogeneous and locally coarse grained, and so we've used a different analysis called a metallic screen assay on the historical core samples and also on all the RAB samples, and we found that that actually uncovered a high-grade interval in the historic core that was previously unknown. And so that's one of the exciting results that has just come out. As far as the new results or the newer drilling, it was in a different area, and we don't yet have those results back. However, what we found in the field is we also did some trenching, and we found visible gold in a trench associated with a fault and arsenopyrite in that fault. So we know that in that area, the gold is correlated to arsenic. And as we measured the chemistry of the fine material in our RAB holes with an XRF handheld device, we noticed arsenic anomalies in most of the holes, with, I believe, 5 holes having very significant arsenic anomalies within them. Of those results, the XRF also returned some gold hits. So it appears likely that at the very least we've hit some grade. And this is all, we've released this as news to the market recently. We expect these results in, any day now. We know the lab is working on them. Metallic screen assays take longer per default because there's more material to process, but that's about as much as I can go into at this point.
That's good. You mentioned the term XRF. It's for people who may or may not be familiar. I think that's X-ray fluorescence, and it's the little Star Trek thing where you hold the little zapper gun over your sample and you shoot it, and it gives you this readout of all sorts of elements, and and because you hire people who've actually studied chemistry in school, they put it all back together and they kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at, which is why everybody should study a little bit of chemistry along the way. Since speaking of that, there's a question that's really pretty common to all three of you, but one of the questioners asked, if you anticipate seeing a lift up or an alleviation of the long time frames to get returns from the labs. 2020 was very bad because we lost several months just to things being shut down, but then there was a backlog, and then the labs have all these these issues where everybody has to wear a mask and social distance and can only have so many people in the room. Okay, I get it. It's taking 4 months to get your lab results back. Do you anticipate that starting to tighten or shorten up as we go into 2021? Greg, why don't you kick off? You've got a lot of action in the labs right now.
Yeah, I think we're seeing them start to address it. I mean, I think just like we had to make adjustments at the project level because of restrictions, how many people you could have in your camp and things, people are making adjustments. They've hired, the people, they've figured out the bottlenecks. We're seeing results starting to come in much more timely now. So I think they're getting caught up, and hopefully the worst of the COVID stuff is behind us here with the vaccines rolling out and things. Yukon was fortunate. We never had a serious issue with it, but they were very cautious about, just making sure nothing got out of hand and the protocols. And my guess is we're going to get back to more normal, 6 weeks to 8 week type turnaround here, going forward, and that most of these bottlenecks are getting addressed.
Okay, that's great. Paul or Jaap, I mean, do you see the same thing happening? Just sort of quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just worth pointing out that there were a couple of factors. I mean, one was COVID, but the other thing was gold hit $2,000 and everybody raised money and everybody started doing exploration, and so everybody was scrambling to sort of meet that new demand, and so I think that. Labs are now staffed up. They're running at full steam. So I'm hopeful that for 2021 that you get results back more quickly.
Yeah, I have one thing to add maybe, and that is that when I was talking to our lab, we use MS Analytical. I believe it was late August or early September. They were surprised that they didn't have a large volume of samples yet, and I recall thinking like, well, that means everything is going to come right at the same time,
all at once.
Yeah, and And that could happen again with interprovincial travel restrictions being eased at the same time later in the summer, etc. So it's I don't think we're completely out of the woods yet, but I do think the labs will be better prepared this year than last year.
Okay, I apologize to everybody who asked a question that we're not going to be able to ask, but we're just a few seconds from the ending time, and they told me, they're just gonna beat me like a dog if I run over. So we're going to have to end it here. Thank you so much, Paul, Greg, Jaap. Thank you to all of our listeners and subscribers who signed up for this. As I understand it, if you formally subscribe to this, you will get an email in the near future with a link to this. The whole thing's been recorded. If you missed part of it, if you want to go back and re-listen to some of it, or if you want to forward it to your friends and everybody about these great ideas, you'll have the link to do that with. Thank you to everyone. And of course, we have people behind the scenes, Ann and Dasha. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all your help. And my friends, Paul, Jaap, and Greg, best wishes and good luck with what you're doing up there. And I hope like hell that we can, get up there and see you this summer, when we can, get back to international travel and flying jets into the likes of Whitehorse and Dawson City. Can't wait. Okay. Thank you, everybody.